Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello. How you doing? Welcome to Wednesday, the 9th of the 12th month of the year, 2015, which is almost toast. Oh, boy. So I'm in a line in my car at a local drive-thru yesterday. Never mind. Yes, I do every once in a while get a hankering, or I'm in a situation where I'm hungry and there's no... Anyway, there I am. And it's a medium line. I'm sitting there. I've got my phone down. I'm a distracted non-driver at the moment, just looking at things. And in my peripheral vision, I'm aware of a presence to my left. And then there's a knock on my window. I turn, and it's a sorry-looking human being. I mean, really sorry-looking human being. And, your reaction is always, I don't know what your reaction is. My reaction is always sort of this, resignation. Oh, no. All right. Okay. So I pushed the little button and the window came down, and I said, yeah. And he said, can you give me some? I'm hungry. I'm starving. He said, can you give me some money, please? Please. And I said, sure. Just wait. I reached over to my purse and I pulled out a bill. It was a 20. And I thought, oh, geez. And then I thought, well, it's Christmas. So I said, here. The whole time I'm pulling it, the whole time he did not stop up his patter. I think he didn't seem quite right, and he seemed to be pulling out all the stops. So he said he was hungry, and then as I'm pulling the money out, he was saying he was homeless, and then he was sick, and I'm thinking all of the above could well be true. So I thought, yeah, and I said, here. And he took it. And then he said, thank you, Granny. Really, thank you, Granny. And I thought, all right. I'm pulling that 20 right out of his fingers. Don't you call me Granny, I said. No, I didn't. But I wanted to. Granny? He called me Granny. He just saw some old gray-haired white lady. Ah! Granny! He must have said it 3 times. I really did. I did want the money back. Get that money back! I'm no granny! That's a first. Although it is akin to, let's drop back about 18 years ago. My son is in kindergarten. Would that be right? Maybe. And I'd gone to pick him up for some reason. And I'm walking into the class, sort of tiptoeing in as the teacher is talking. This is the teacher. I don't think it was the same day, but this is the teacher who I famously heard tell an audience of kids sitting cross-legged in front of her. Now, when Abraham Lincoln cut down that cherry tree, and I remember looking, I thought, oh, dear God. But then I thought, who cares? I mean, Abraham Lincoln didn't cut down a cherry tree, but probably George Washington didn't cut down a cherry tree either, and who the hell knows? It's all this stupid mythology, and she's all mixed up. Oh, God. So anyway, I walked into that same class, and a little kid, I forget his name, the name was just perfect for him. This little kid sitting behind my son poked Sam in the back, and he having seen me, and he said, "Hey, Sam, your grandma's here." And I heard that, and I thought, I wanted to pick him up I'm not his grandmother, I'm his mother. I often said that one of the reasons that when I began to turn gray that I covered it was because I was such an old mother. I was 44 when I became a mother, and I didn't want my kid to have like this he's going to have one of the oldest mothers, if not the oldest, but I didn't want him to have a mother that looked like his grandmother. That little kid in what, just like, "Hey, Sam, your grandma's here." And I thought, well, the gig is up. I mean, if I can't, is it the jig is up or the gig is up? Jig, spelled the same though, right? G-I-G. Yeah. Anyway, the jig is up. I mean, a 6-year-old knows you're quite able to be the kid's grandmother. I probably was older than the kid's grandmother is probably true, in fact. But anyway, so I was called a grandmother but Granny! Jeez.
Jig.
Huh? It's gig?
No, it's jig. J-I-G.
Oh, it is. The jig is up is J-I-G?
Yep. Like, do a jig.
Like a jig?
Over.
I wonder if that's what it is. If that's the derivation. It's jig is up. So the gig is up is you've lost your job. The jig is up is you've been found out. All right. I have an experiment going today. And so far so good. I am intending to get through this program without mentioning a certain gargoyle of a human who is bogarting the news. And I'm so sick of it and can't take it that I'm really going to try. I don't know if I'll be successful, but we'll give it a shot. I've got a few things here, and I thought maybe we could manage it. So let's try. I want to do some history. History, please. Jack Johnson. Naming anything to you? Actually, I know a few Jack Johnsons myself. We got a call? Watch it. Okay. Hello.
Hello, Clarence.
Clarence.
Hey. About 5 years ago, there was this woman who worked in this place, always had this little girl with her. And I've seen them. I've drawn their characters around Canonsburg, and one time I see her without the little girl. I said, "Oh, where's your granddaughter?" "That's not my granddaughter, that's my daughter."
Oh, see? You did it too.
I've done it. And I told her, I explained to her, because she was in her mid-40s, the girl was about 5.
Yeah.
I said, in my world, you were a grandmother when you were a grandmother when you were in your 30s.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was thinking the kid might have had a great grandmother as old as me. I know. Yeah.
I have my oldest sister is 60 years old, and she's a great grandmother. She had her son young.
Yeah.
Her son had a daughter young. Mm-hmm. His daughter had her kids young.
Right.
Right.
So I mean, if you have kids that
bad,
yeah.
I said, now I don't assume, because that was the first time all that time she was walking around with that little girl. I thought it was her she was a little gray and all that stuff. I thought it was her granddaughter.
Wow.
For years, not for as soon as when the kid was a baby. The whole time I thought it was her granddaughter.
Well, you gotta expect it, I guess. I mean, you just do.
Nowadays, it's different. People are having kids a lot later in life.
But
but in my world experienced that.
But Granny was a
cracked up when
bridge
you
too
said-
far.
I didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming. That was a good story.
Oh,
When you said Granny, I laughed out loud.
And he kept repeating it. Thank you, Granny. Thank you, Granny. Granny. I just want to go.
Yeah, the funny thing is not Miss. He went with Granny. So now,
Yeah.
I don't, thank you, Miss, thank you, ma'am, anything like that. But
No.
why Granny?
Yeah, do I
just think-
look that much like Granny? Maybe he calls all older women, and I'm an older woman. He calls Granny.
But the thing is, that which is really generational in my brain is, although you're older, you don't look like a granny. In my world, the granny is the granny from Warner Brothers cartoons. The white hair pulled up in a bun.
Right,
in
but
a
that's
movie or
not. That
something.
is not what grannies look like anymore.
That's not what grannies look like anymore. So I just think it's interesting that the granny has switched. That when if somebody say, "Hey, can you draw me a granny?" I'm going to draw, that Bugs Bunny type granny. But I think somebody in their 20s might do something completely different.
I wonder because grannies, can be. I'm amazed at how many friends of mine now are grandmothers,
Mm-hmm.
and they're younger than me by 10, 15 years, and they're beautiful, young to me looking women. They don't look like that, that stereotype.
I was working this weekend. A friend of mine has a cooking, a store.
Yes.
Without giving names. But I worked at the door. She has a sale, a big sale with all clad. And this one woman, little blonde lady, who had holes in the knees of her jeans the first time she came in 2 years ago. And,
Which is to say, wait a minute, which is to say that she was not some tattered bum, but that she was hip.
Yeah, she was like a hip.
She was hip.
Woman.
Yes.
And so I always joke to her about I call her, hey, it's hole in her jeans, every time she comes in. So I was helping her to her car with some product, and she had a Jeep. She said, oh, we can't put it in the back because I have my granddaughter's stroller back there. I went, you're a grandma?
Yeah, so you can't. Everything's upended.
Grandma has changed a lot.
I know. You know what? It is true. I'm always talking about how everything's shifting under our feet, but I'm never talking about that, but it's true.
Yeah, gee. And I'm trying to go deep into this guy's brain. He had to call his grandmother Granny, because who uses the word Granny anymore? Unless his grandmother, he called his grandmother Granny. You know what I mean? Nobody says Granny anymore, so unless,
Well, I can't place his age, but I'm no good at placing age, but he wasn't young. Yeah, but he wasn't old.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Somebody in that condition could look older than they actually are.
That is true. And he, I couldn't tell if he was, on something or whatever. He was the poor guy. I didn't know.
But I was sitting there thinking, who uses the word granny anymore? So my assumption would be that he called his grandmother Granny.
Probably.
So actually, calling you Granny was
a compliment.
A compliment, yeah.
Well, it's a good thing then I didn't.
Somebody took care of him when he was a kid and all that kind of good stuff. So.
It's a good thing I didn't jump on him then. But something like Granny. I just had it really actually it upset me for 1 second and then made me crack up.
I have to say, the way you told that story, because I didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming.
Good.
Good story.
Hey, so listen, here's what I want to talk about next is Jack Johnson. Does that name ring a bell in your head?
No.
Oh, sure.
But I can make jokes.
No.
I won't do that.
Jack Johnson, come on. In history.
No, I have no, I'm not Tom from, I'm not Sissy Liberal. History's not my thing. I'm the science guy.
Okay, if I were to throw in, I'm not going to let you go yet. Throw in a clue, the Great White Hope.
Okay, he's a basketball player.
Oh, get off. Get out of
boxer?
here. You are so out. Yeah,
Okay.
A boxer, Jack Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Long gone.
Okay.
But it was his ascendancy to the heavyweight boxing championship that created an American, cry from coast to coast for a great white hope.
So he's the bare knuckle boxer that was beating everybody up.
Yeah, although he wasn't bare knuckle. They had.
So he wasn't being bare knuckle?
No, they had gloves.
That's the picture I see of him
Yeah,
standing there.
but he's the one that he was scaring the bejeebers out of America. White
like
America.
Obama's doing right now. That's why Trump is winning.
Exactly right. I mean, they were terrified of him. It's amazing, actually, that he wasn't killed. I can't believe he wasn't killed. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Jack Johnson. So, even though you're not in
there were two things I'm weak. You asked me questions about two subjects.
Sports and history.
Sports and history.
Got them in both. Okay, well then you hang up, and I want you to listen a little because it's a awful story, and the end chapter has yet to be written, but it could be. And another black man who you mentioned could write the chapter.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, Jack Johnson in 1908, all right, so we're over 100 years ago, in 1908, stunned America by becoming the heavyweight champion, when this had never gone to a black man. Not only that, Jack Johnson was an unapologetic man. He didn't do any, he felt, not only felt strong, lived strong, he defied all of the assumptions of what a black man's place was in America. He stuck a finger in America's blue eye. Which is why I always thought, wow, he must have been the bravest, angriest man. An amazing man. There was literally a hysteria that grasped the nation. And there was this, prayers for a great white hope to knock this black man out of the ring. When he defeated James Jeffries, his victory set off riots across the country. People died in those riots. Mostly black people died in those riots. 2 years later, the hysteria only getting worse. No, I think I've got this a little inside out. 2 years after the riots, the federal government finally did what all those supposed great white hopes couldn't do. The feds took him down. And they took him down because one of the most outrageous things he had done, not so much that he showed he was stronger and a greater fighter than any white guy they could put in the ring with him, but he invariably had beautiful white girlfriends. At a time when that was, really, you're asking to be killed. It was also against the law, right? In most states. I think in almost every state. So in 1913, the feds had a great idea, and they convicted him, an all-white jury, convicted him of transporting his white girlfriend across state lines, a violation of the Mann Act, which was not really about that. The Mann Act was designed to stop the proliferation of prostitution, I believe. taking women, usually immigrant women, across state lines. He was convicted, and he served jail time. 366 days in jail. He was railroaded. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He was brought down and railroaded for the crime of being an extremely successful black man. A powerful black man. An independent black man. A black man who insisted on living his life his way, refusing to acknowledge all of the boundaries that had been placed around him by the society he lived in. Now I'm going to introduce an unlikely person into this story. I am going to introduce Senator John McCain. Where does this come in? For over 10 years, John McCain has been he is sort of obsessed with this. He wants a pardon. Posthumous, obviously. He wants a pardon for Jack Johnson. He has campaigned for an executive pardon for Johnson to no avail. Now stop and think. That means that his efforts to get George W. Bush to give him a pardon, his efforts thus far to get Barack Obama to give Jack Johnson a pardon, President Clinton, everybody who'd been asked. Now, Clinton was asked not because of McCain, but because there has been often an effort. The historian, the documentarian Ken Burns, is very much involved in this as well. Believe it or not, a resolution has passed the Senate of the United States saying, pardon Jack Johnson. The House, might have to hold your breath for a long time because they probably still don't believe that a black guy should have a white girlfriend. I don't know. McCain has said, quote, we need to put some pressure on the House to pass the resolution, but the best way to do this would be for the president to say, I want this legislation. I want this man pardoned. But I don't think it takes legislation. The president can pardon him by himself. William Roden, who's a sports writer in the New York Times, good writer too, he has written this. I know the president has higher priorities than pardoning a boxer who died in 1946. But in a nation that promotes itself as the land of the free, there are few things more important than removing destructive symbols like the Confederate flag or correcting injustices like the imprisonment of Jack Johnson. And McCain says this, don't you think this issue has something to say about the character of America? The issue says something, this is McCain, the issue says something about our reluctance to look back, to do the work needed to fix the flawed foundation of a nation conceived in democracy, but built on the backs of 40 million slaves. That's Senator John McCain. Now, W.E.B. Du Bois, who was an extraordinary black man and one of the founders of the NAACP, said this, obviously many years ago, about Jack Johnson. The reason Jack Johnson was so beset by his own country, a country, ironically, which had only recently reaffirmed that all men were created equal. But the reason he was beset by his own country was because of his unforgivable blackness. Ken Burns took those two words, unforgivable blackness, and used that as the title of a documentary he made about Jack Johnson, which I highly recommend, in 2004. It was that documentary that John McCain watched that got McCain just totally focused on righting this wrong. Now, Johnson's behavior as he lived his life was a big issue back then, not just among whites, but among some blacks who felt that his ostentatious, in-your-face, belligerent kind of was not helpful to the rest of them. You can argue the point. He enraged segments of both the white and the black community, mostly the white community. He openly traveled with white women. He married white women. That was like the ultimate taboo. He taunted people. He bragged about his prowess. He belittled his opponents. So he, as I said, he stuck a finger in America's blue eye. But it's hard for me to believe that Barack Obama will not find time on his way out to pardon Jack Johnson. I'm just saying. I'd do it in a minute. And what William Roden says, it's not only Jack Johnson who needs the pardon. It's us. Well, he didn't say that. He said we do. It's more proper. And in a time of demonstrations against police brutality and demonstrations against racism at some of the nation's most prestigious universities, knowing that this is still with us, what McCain so eloquently said, that this was a country that was conceived in liberty and freedom. I want to find his exact words because they were wonderful. Dang it! Where was that? I had it here somewhere. But that was built, I can't find it, conceived in freedom, but that was built on the backs of 40 million slaves. Yeah. Jack Johnson. Well over a century after he was imprisoned. Huh? Barack! I can't even. Why didn't Clinton do it? Why didn't Bush do it? Why didn't anybody do it? This is insane. There's a so-so movie about Jack Johnson called The Great White Hope, starring James Earl Jones. And, I'm blanking on her name, as his girlfriend. It's powerful, and it's hard to watch. And the documentary, Unforgivable Blackness, that's a toughie, too. Okay. A little more history. And today's next history lesson, Clarence, I want you to keep listening here. See why history is such a wonderful thing and is such a... I understand not following sports, but not knowing history, that I don't get. This is a story about a guy named Tibor, not sure how to pronounce it, Rubin. Let me tell you his story. He was born in a little Hungarian shtetl, like a little Jewish enclave. A shtetl of about 120 families. His father was I don't know what he was. They were poor people. When the Nazis started heading into Hungary, his parents sent him away with some adult escorts who were going to attempt to reach Switzerland with him and a few other kids. He was 14 years old. They didn't make it. They were caught. And he was put into a concentration camp. The commandant told him and his 6 fellows that he was with that none of them should expect to get out alive. He barely did. He was near death when the camp was liberated by American soldiers in May of 1945. He's 15 then, and he said, I promised the Lord that I would become a G.I. Joe. I wanted to give something back to these people who had saved me. So it took him a while, but 3 years later, he finally got himself to the United States. So now he's about 18. And he enlisted. He went into the service. He was not yet a citizen, but he enlisted. The Korean War had just begun, and he ended up over there. He was unlucky because the guy who commanded his unit has since been described by other people in the unit as a almost crazed anti-Semite. And the others in his unit said that Corporal Rubin was assigned constantly to the most dangerous missions, including one in which he single-handedly held off a wave of North Korean soldiers for 24 hours, securing the ability of his own troops to retreat safely. when Corporal Rubin's battalion, excuse me, was ambushed by thousands of Chinese troops, the Americans' firepower, I'm now quoting, by the way, a president of the United States, the Americans' firepower soon dwindled to a single machine gun. The weapon was in an exposed position, and 3 soldiers had already died manning it. And that was when Corporal Rubin stepped forward. He fought until his ammunition was gone, and he was badly wounded and captured and sent to a POW camp. Picking it up at the POW camp, he spent more time in that POW camp than he had in the Nazis' concentration camp. He spent 30 months there. Testimony from his fellow prisoners was unanimous in that he did everything in his power to help the others who were in that camp. He snuck out of the camp at night. He foraged for food. He stole from enemy supplies, and he brought back what he could to help keep his comrades alive and nourished. Leo Cormier, a fellow prisoner, wrote, "He shared his food. He took care of us. He nursed us. He carried us to the latrine." They made it out. Not surprisingly, Colonel Rubin was recommended for the Medal of Honor. He didn't get it. And he was recommended again, and he didn't get it. And again, and he didn't get it. And it turned out that that virulent anti-Semite, who did his best to get the guy killed in Korea, ignored all the orders from his own supervisors to prepare the appropriate paperwork for a Medal of Honor designation. So I tell you this because this was the obituary of the day. Tibor Rubin has died at the age of 86. He was finally given his Medal of Honor by George W. Bush, whose words I had shared with you earlier. So this is a guy who joined the Army in a country he was not yet a citizen of, to repay the American soldiers and the nation that had rescued him from the concentration camp. And strangely, he was in that camp because he was, of course, a Jew. And then fighting for America, risking his life so many times. He was denied his rightful recognition because he was a Jew. By the way, his father died in Buchenwald. His mother died in Auschwitz. His sister died in Auschwitz. But I put that together with the Jack Johnson piece of history because it shows it's never too late to make things right. Huh? We made it right to this man. And at least he lived to see it made right. Jack Johnson did not, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. Oh, Clarence, you're getting old. I'm going to start calling you Gramps. Clarence has written, geez, I saw that Ken Burns documentary. I saw the movie with James Earl Jones, and the name still didn't ring a bell. Well, I understand. Okay. There is a story, a big story, that has been going on right around here. And I've never mentioned it, much to my shame. I have not taken the time to find out really what the issues were. I have somewhat remedied that now. But I wanted to share with you what I've learned so that you too will understand if and when you see a little snippet on the news. A little snippet on the news that will impact the lives of thousands of your fellow Americans, but is not getting much attention at all. I bet you've seen somewhere that Allegheny Technologies, which used to be Allegheny Ludlam, which is a big steel producer, well, they ain't any of them as big as they used to be, but is still producing steel in these here parts. They got a big rolling mill in Brackenridge. As a matter of fact, this is a totally new mill that they invested well over $1 billion in. And the excitement in the Allegheny River Valley when that thing was being built was palpable, because it meant that those pretty good paying jobs at the mill were going to, in fact, increase. And the workers at that mill who did all of the work, retrofitting, getting this place up and running, were working like 7 days a week, 12, 13, 14 hours a day, all of like 2014, trying to get this mill up. And as soon as it was ready to go, that they were to walk in and start working in the mill that they had essentially built and retrofitted, Allegheny Technologies locked them out. Said, not you. And they hired a bunch of scabs to come in and take those jobs. Since August 15th, Allegheny has locked out over 2,000 workers. And believe it or not, labor is not covered as a story anymore. Not locally, not nationally, nowhere. But this has, right in our backyard, and we don't even pay attention to it, has become one of the nation's largest and longest work stoppages in years. Understand, this is not a strike called by the union. This is the company telling the union workers, until you agree to what we're saying is going to be the conditions of your employment under a new contract, you can't come in. They've locked them out since the summer. The company says what you expect the company to say. We gotta have lower labor costs to survive in the global economy. The union says they have been taking hit after hit after hit in costs for years and years and years, and they can't take it anymore. They say there will be no middle class left. The company wants a 2-tier contract which means that anybody hired now under the contract would make like half of what the people are being paid now. This is after a 4-year wage freeze, as it were. This is after these guys have had to swallow fewer benefits and much higher costs. They were locked out because they wouldn't sign the contract that so much for collective bargaining. The company just said, screw you, and locked them out. Unions are weak now. The effort by the Republican Party to destroy them has been extremely successful. The Republican Party might be a party going seemingly, into Crazyville. But their dogged long-term efforts to roll back a woman's right to terminate a pregnancy, a worker's right to join a union and bargain collectively, these things that are, you think are rights. No, the war on working people and women by the Republican Party has been extraordinarily successful. And if Allegheny Technologies, Allegheny Ludlam to the oldsters here, if the Steelworkers Union loses this, don't think that other companies won't say, whoa, and that they will force other workers out until they cry uncle and agree to concession after concession after concession. The New York Times did a really nice piece on this, and they actually show you the pictures of people whose lives have been impacted. These are good old Yinzers. These are people who have worked there for 25 years, 38 years. They're black, they're white. They've been making what has been a good living. Listen to what this company did. The company terminated their health coverage last month. None of these people, these thousands of people who have had health, they don't have health care now. And with Christmas, Merry Christmas, with Christmas right around the corner and winter right around the corner, after 6 months of unemployment, their insurance is going to, their insurance will run out in early February. They won't have, that's their unemployment insurance. They're not going to have any money coming in at all. Company is simply waiting them out until they are cold, hungry, and desperate. Let me give you a little more history on this, because this one's right here, and we don't know about it. I've seen stuff in the paper about it, but it's weird how local media doesn't really ever focus on this stuff. They'll tell you there's a friggin' fire hydrant that's gone somewhere, but not that there's 2,000 desperate people right in our neighborhood. This new rolling mill, it's 4 football fields long that these guys built, is a marvel of automation. It's unbelievable. None of the hard work that you think of as a steel mill, workers will work over control panels and all this stuff is like automated. I don't know. The union, oh, by the way, as they're asking for all these give-backs and stuff, the company, of course, gave its CEO a 70% increase in his salary. Richard Harshman. Is that not a great name for this latter-day Scrooge? Richard Harshman. He managed to get himself $8 million in compensation last year. And he begrudges these guys a middle-class wage for their quarter century of labor for them. It is such a kick in the head. The union has asked the National Labor Relations Board to declare that this lockout is illegal, and they're asking that the NLRB order the company to pay more than $30 million in back wages owed to these guys. So all this is before the NLRB at this point. At least it's functioning now since Obama's been in. It literally was not functioning with a Republican in the White House for years. Another reason why you never vote for a Republican. The company is insisting that it be able to schedule workers as it sees fit, including 16-hour days and 70-hour weeks. Where are we? Are we in 1887? What is this? Is Frick going to come walking down the hall in a second here? What the I'm just saying. Amazing. Allegheny Technologies. Merry Christmas to all. Man, I'll tell you, the more things change, the more, right? Jesus. So it is mind-blowing, is it not, that none of you have ever brought this story up. I never brought the story up. Were you even aware of it? Celine wasn't. No. This has been going on since August, and we turn a blind eye to it, which is why the Scrooges, like Mr. Harshman of this world, get to just push a few more Americans clinging by their fingernails to middle-class existences to kick them off that ledge. More history. This one, I'm changing subjects, and we're dropping again way back. What's weird is I think because the thread that goes through history, whether we drop back to BC, whether we go back to medieval times, whether we go back to the Korean War or to Jack Johnson's era or to the robber baron era, and things just keep coming back and look so much the same, right? The common thread is what? Humans. It's humans. It's greed. It's fear. Struggle. And these same things just play out. Nothing gained. Once you think you got something, like women have the right to choose, there's a tendency to just say, do you see? And I want to say to young women, the gains that all those old granny feminists struggled for, you think those can't get rolled back too? Everything can be pulled back if the people who wish it end up in power. And since the corporatists are so in power in this country, it's not surprising that at a steel mill in the Pittsburgh area, you have companies wanting to be able to have workers work 16 hours a day and 70 hours a week. We've been there before. We fought that. That was what gave rise to unions and to strong unions. And we've let them go. You think that was going to stay forever? Not if it's not fought for. And all of these clueless American workers who are anti-union, who don't realize that everything they've got was gotten for them by the blood of workers now long gone, who fought for a right for them to have a vacation, who fought for the right for them to have overtime or job security or a measure of safety on the job. And now all of that is being pulled back. And that fight will have to happen all over again. Okay, this one is really mind-blowing. This, I'm going to read a letter to you written by Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, two of our former presidents who at the time had yet to become presidents. They were, at the time, diplomats for America, and they were in England on diplomatic business. And part of that business was talking to the ambassador from Tripoli. Is that now Libya? Tripoli. Yeah, I think so. Because there was a real problem with piracy happening on the seas by pirates from Tripoli, the Barbary States. You've heard about that, right? The Barbary Coast, the Barbary State. And this was a big issue. So the young Jefferson and the young Adams met with the guy from Tripoli and said, hey, we can't have this. Something's going to give here. And the guy from Tripoli didn't give him much. And here's the letter they wrote back to what was then called the U.S. Secretary of Foreign Affairs. That would be our Secretary of State now. And he, too, has a name you'll recognize, John Jay. And here is a letter from March 28, 1786, signed by Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. We took the liberty to make some inquiries concerning the ground of their pretensions to make war upon nations who had done them no injury, and observed that we considered all mankind as our friends who had done us no wrong, nor had given us any provocation. Their ambassador answered us that it was founded on the laws of their prophet, that it was written in their Koran, that all nations who should not have acknowledged their authority were sinners, that it was their right and their duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found, and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners, and that every Muslim who was slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. (1786), Thomas Jefferson. Okay, and Melanie writes, just FYI, even more surprising is that Harshman did not grow up with a silver spoon. He's from Pittsburgh, and I knew his family. They were not even remotely rich. Very sad. Wow. Okay, That was the history lesson for today. Good stuff, huh? I hope. Anyway, see you in 23.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.